on the pivotal day of September 24th, 787 AD, Empress Irene of the Byzantine Empire sat in the grand hall of the Hagia Sophia in Nicaea. The air was filled with the scent of incense and a sense of divine purpose as bishops, abbots, and theologians from across the Christian world convened for what would be the Second Council of Nicaea. Outside the chamber were her critics and supporters alike, their whispers, a reminder of the political and religious chasm that had divided the empire for over half a century, the contentious issue of Iconoclasm. Just the day before, Irene had taken a moment to consult with Tarasios, the Patriarch of Constantinople, who had been a layman until she appointed him. The two were ideological allies in a Byzantine court that had seen decades of religious discord. But Tarasios, and indeed for Irene, the council represented a turning point, a chance to put to rest a religious controversy that had sown division and discord. The council would determine whether icons, a focal point in the daily life and worship of many Christians, would be considered sacred or heretical. As each point was debated and religious texts and traditions examined, it was clear that the council was not merely an academic exercise. It was a spiritual reckoning, affecting not just the empire, but the broader world of Christendom. By the end of the council, the veneration of icons was affirmed, and those in opposition were declared heretics. The decision would shape Orthodox Christianity and resonate through the centuries, even attracting the endorsement of Pope Hadrian I. In that intricate dance of theology and power, the Byzantine Empire and Christian orthodoxy itself was indelibly altered. Was Irene a devout believer, acting on a deeply held spiritual conviction, or was she a master of statecraft, using religion to consolidate her rule? Were the attendees of the council faithful theologians or political agents? Join us today on Historical Quarrels as we explore these questions and many more. As stated earlier, Irene was a complex figure whose reign encompassed moments of both religious fervor and political intrigue. Drawing on the wisdom of Socrates, who asserted that an unexamined life is not worth living, let us delve into the enigmatic world of Empress Irene, the Second Council of Nicaea, and a decision that would leave an indelible mark on both the Eastern Orthodox and Roman Catholic churches for centuries to come. Welcome back, everyone. So glad that you're here listening. As mentioned before, I'm recording this right after my last episode last week on the Byzantine Empire. This episode will be focused on Empress Irene. I do not know how you guys will take the last week's episode, so if it sucked or if it was great, either way, thank you for letting me know. I hope you will let me know either way, because honestly, if it sucks, I need to know. And if it's great, I would also need to know. It just helps me know like where to go forward with things. As always, the show is NSFW, not safe for work. Guys, do not listen to this in front of your bosses, because your boss will hear me call them a stupid little cunt, a dumb little bitch boy who likes to cry to his mommy and try to suck on the titties. Or something like that. I don't know. But like, I hope you were listening that in front of your boss. And I hope I hope you just heard your boss is, and then, what I just said. So, if not, that's good. I'm glad you avoided that issue. So as mentioned before, today we're going over the life of Empress Irene in the Second Council of Nicaea. We will be focusing on a few points that I wanted to make with this series. This episode actually may end up being shorter than all the other episodes. And I probably could have attached it to the last episode. It's just kind of like an additional 30 minutes. But I figured if this one was just kind of like something short, because again, I'm going on vacation. I'm going on vacation, guys. I do not want to bring my equipment with me while I'm out in the woods and try and record out in the woods. It's a little silly to do. So, I mean, I'd probably be back in time to edit everything. But if I could just get it all done today, knock it all out, that's going to be a lot easier for me. So let's go ahead and dive into today's historical quarrel. So in AD 752, literally 1 year after the donation of Pepin from last week's episode, Irene was born to a noble family in Athens, a city in the Byzantine Empire, but one with a rich history of classical paganism. Her upbringing in Athens, a city synonymous with ancient Greek philosophy, drama, and polytheism, would later present an interesting contrast to her fervent Christian orthodoxy. It's worth noting that by the time of Irene's birth, Athens had been Christianized for centuries, but relics and reminders of its pagan past were everywhere, integrated into the fabric of the city. You can't just completely erase pagan history, as the Christians have found out, sadly. So for them, it's sad. As a member of the nobility, Irene would have been educated in a manner that likely included the study of ancient texts, including works by pagan authors. Her high social status and education in Athens would have afforded her the ability to learn about pagan philosophy and the gods of ancient Greece. The cultural richness of her birthplace had a twofold impact. While it steeped her in a tradition that had its roots a polytheistic belief system, it was also the city where early Christian philosophy had engaged deeply with pagan thought, as evidenced by works like the Church Father Justin Martyr's First Apology, which aims to reconcile Greek philosophy and Christian doctrine. Despite this rich tapestry of religious thought, Irene emerges in history as a devout Christian. By the time she rose to power, she was unflinchingly committed to the Nicene form of Christianity, a faith rooted in the suppression of all other religious practices, including paganism. So she was like, nah, fuck everything else. We got Nicene. That's the form of Christianity that needs to be dominant. As she moved from Athens to the heart of the Byzantine Empire, she became a part of an administration that had for years been promoting Christianity as the state religion, often at the expense of pagan practices. While her reign is not specifically marked by a dramatic surge in the persecution of pagans, the era as a whole was one where the Christian empire was increasingly intolerant of pagan practices, and they had essentially dominated everything at this point. They were completely in charge, and pagans were this very marginalized group that were viewed with suspicion, like at the very beginning of Christianity. It's like what George Lucas said. It's cyclical. It's a circle. He's doing cyclical storytelling, I guess. Paganism during Irene's time was not the influential force it had once been, but it had also not been entirely extinguished. Small communities and philosophical circles still discussed and perhaps practiced the old religions. Although there is no direct evidence to suggest Irene took specific actions against pagans, her stringent focus on Christian orthodoxy and the policies she later enacted helped create an environment that was, at best, inhospitable to non-Christian faiths. Why is that word hard? That shouldn't be a hard word. Irene's birth and early life in Athens therefore represent a complex interplay of historical and cultural forces. She was born into a society that was overwhelmingly Christian, but was itself built atop a deeply pagan past. This coexistence, however peaceful it may have seemed on the surface, was fraught with an undercurrent of tension, as the state-sponsored form of Christianity increasingly saw itself as the only acceptable form of religious expression. No one else was allowed to say who God or what God was. God damn it. And then they get struck by lightning by saying God damn it. So, proving their point. Okay, and then AD 769, we have her marriage to Leo IV. Irene was married off to Leo IV, effectively making her empress consort of the Byzantine Empire. The institution of marriage within the Byzantine Empire, especially among the elites, was not merely a personal union, but a colossal intertwining of political ambitions, religious goals, and social expectations. For Irene, this was a monumental leap from noblewoman to the helm of the Byzantine Empire, putting her in a position to influence state affairs, including religious policies. Irene's marriage to Leo IV brought her into the heart of the Byzantine court, a political and social arena where orthodoxy and the consolidation of the Christian faith were pressing concerns. Leo IV was known as Leo the Khazar, reflecting his mother's Khazar heritage. The Khazars were Turkic people, many of whom had converted to Judaism. which further complicated the religious landscape that Irene found herself navigating. While Leo IV was a Christian like his father, his unique heritage would have added another layer of complexity to the religious tensions of the time. He would have understood the plight of the Jewish people and understood where they're coming from a lot more than previous emperors had in the past. The role of Empress Consort was not a mere ceremonial title. The Empress was often deeply involved in governance, church affairs, and even military strategy. Irene's position would offer her an intimate look at the workings of an empire that was Christian at its core, but still had remnants of its diverse religious past. The empire had spent considerable effort suppressing pagan practices and enforcing Christian orthodoxy, and this was the political stage Irene stepped onto. As Empress Consort, one of Irene's responsibilities was to bear an heir. She had to get to fucking, and they had to be making babies. This was not just a familial duty, but a religious and political one as well. Producing a Christian heir was seen as further cementing the empire's religious orientation, as this heir would carry on the policies set by previous Christian rulers. Her son, Constantine VI, would be brought up in this Christian imperial milieu, indoctrinated from birth in the tenets of the Nicene Creed. Essentially, they started this whole, almost like the God Emperor thing again, but they're born to rule because God said so, and because the Pope says that they're good Christians. Well, not the Pope, but the patriarch of the Eastern Orthodox Church. So Leo IV's reign, although not extraordinarily long, was marked by a degree of religious conservatism, particularly with regard to the veneration of icons. This would lay the groundwork for Irene's later actions. It's worth noting that the atmosphere of the court was already charged with the ongoing debates about the role of religious images in Christian practice. People are fighting all the time. They're like, nah, dude, so, we're just venerating them. We're trying to, celebrate them. And you guys are trying to fuck that up. And I think that's going to piss off God. And they're like, no, you're already pissing off God because God said no idols. And that's clearly an idol. And you're doing the same shit the pagans were doing. Fuck you. And they were like, no, fuck you. Lots of back and forth of fuck yous there. So the empire was in the throes of the Iconoclast controversy, which questioned whether the veneration of icons was a form of idolatry. While Leo leaned toward the Iconoclast viewpoint, Irene had a different take, one that would become vividly clear after Leo's death. So she kept her mouth shut because she knew she had to be quiet about this shit. So then we have in 780, the death of Leo. So Leo would die in 780, and essentially she would take over, right? And she would become the chief in charge of the empire here. So, and while she was doing that, she would appoint Tarasios as Patriarch of Constantinople. So in 784, this was a defining moment in both her reign and the broader religious landscape of the Byzantine Empire. The significance of appointing a layman to such a high ecclesiastical position should not be underestimated. It broke with long-standing traditions and demonstrated Irene's willingness to exercise her authority in religious matters. Tarasios was not just any layman. He was a high-ranking official in the imperial administration, well-versed in theology, and, crucially, aligned with Irene's views on the veneration of icons. They also might have been fucking in the back. We don't know for sure, but, there might have been some fucking going on. So the appointment had a far-reaching impact on the relationship between Byzantine Empire and the Roman Catholic Church. It was well received by Pope Hadrian I, signaling a momentary reconciliation between the eastern and western branches of Christianity. For the Pope, this was a hopeful sign of healing the schism that had been widening between the two churches over matters of doctrine and authority. The support from the Pope also gave Irene considerable leverage against her internal critics and those who opposed to her religious policies. Tarasios' appointment also had the effect of rallying the anti-iconoclast clergy around Irene, solidifying her base of support within the Byzantine Church. So as patriarch, Tarasios would later play a significant role in the Second Council of Nicaea in 787. So the Second Council is all set up because Irene liked it. And also she grew up with a bunch of people, a bunch of history of people worshiping icons with their pagan beliefs. So she was already kind of used to the idea of icon worship and was totally fine with it. So totally no bias there at all. Not at all. His elevated position for Tarasios allowed him a powerful platform from which to denounce heretical views, potentially making life difficult for adherents of non-Orthodox Christian doctrines and other religious traditions, including remaining pagans within the empire. Given the religious climate, Irene's choice of Tarasios could also be seen as a strategic move against any resurgence of Iconoclasm and other forms of religious dissent. This was a way to essentially calm people down and get them, to stop fucking arguing and causing all these issues. The empire had witnessed several instances of religious unrest, and the appointment of doctrinally aligned patriarchs served as a preemptive measure to unify the church internally and to coordinate its stance against religious deviations. While not a persecution of pagans per se, the strengthened religious orthodoxy would have left little room for pagan practices to exist openly. They still weren't really allowed to exist at all openly. They had been fucked over considerably. So, and then we have, finally, we're here, 787. We're at the Second Council of Nicaea, right? So, the Second Council of Nicaea, which was convened in 787, stands as perhaps the most pivotal event in Irene's tenure, reverberating throughout Christendom for centuries to come. Called to session by Irene herself, this council was aimed at resolving the long-standing iconoclastic controversy that plagued the Byzantine Empire for decades. This divisive issue had resulted in both political and religious strife, with emperors, clergy, and common people passionately divided over the role of religious images in Christian worship. Irene's role as the instigator of the council was monumental. With Tarasios by her side as the Patriarch of Constantinople, Irene crafted an environment where the theological debate could be decisively settled. The council's condemnation of iconoclasm and the restoration of the veneration of icons marked the resounding victory for her. It wasn't just a matter of personal belief for Irene, it was also a cunning political maneuver. By securing a theological victory, she effectively nullified one of the primary criticisms levied against her rule and could project an image of unity and orthodoxy to her subjects. Basically telling people to fuck off. I have everything under control. Everyone's under my control by doing this. That was the point of the Second Council of Nicaea. It wasn't just to really start worshiping icons and idols. It was to assert control for Irene. Moreover, the council's decisions received the explicit endorsement of Pope Hadrian I. This was a critical milestone, for it symbolized the temporary healing of the rift between the Eastern and Western churches. It was a moment of ecumenical triumph that had broader geopolitical implications. In a single stroke, Irene had managed to bring the Eastern Orthodox Church into alignment with its Roman Catholic counterpart, a considerable achievement given the tensions that had characterized their relationship up to that point. Yet, as with the appointment of Tarasios, the strengthening of Christian orthodoxy in the empire likely had an additional consequence: the complete marginalization of every other religious perspective, including remnants of paganism, including remnants of Judaism that were still in the empire. Even though Leo IV's, mother was, from a Jewish line, she fucked everyone else over. So, although the council did not directly concern itself with non-Christian beliefs, it was an establishment of a very strong Orthodox position that left little room for alternative religious practices, effectively putting them at greater risk of suppression. However, this view on idols did allow pagans to essentially worship gods again in a pluralistic way, where they had saints now. So in the longer term, Irene's role in the Second Council of Nicaea also has to be considered in the context of the concept of symphonia, the Byzantine ideal of harmony between church and state. With the council's verdict, Irene established a religious climate in which the emperor, or in this case, the empress, was perceived as God's regent on earth. They set up god emperors again, responsible for both spiritual and temporal matters. Her manipulation of religious issues to strengthen her own authority was a masterful demonstration of the political utility of theology, one that would be studied and imitated by rulers for generations to come. She did what earlier emperors, like the ones before Nero, so Julius Caesar, tried to establish. And then Augustus, oh my God, I'm gonna be mad. The guy who killed Mark Antony, that guy set up the imperial cult with the god emperor. She essentially did the same thing, but just had the Pope endorse her and have her be a leader of the church as well, in addition to also being the leader of the state, which is fucking crazy. they just repeated it and did this exact same shit multiple times over and over again. It's the stagnation that really fucks over the Roman Empire as a whole. I mean, Rome already fell at this point, but still, it's like you still have this remnant of the Roman Empire with its capital having been moved to Constantinople or Constantinople, however you want to pronounce it. But yeah, it's just crazy. So that they did it again. Okay. And so I know we're at the end of the Second Council of Nicaea. There's a lot more I can get into, but like I said, I'm going on vacay. So this is going to be a pretty short episode. Don't expect this to be too crazy. The laughs may not be there as well, but this is really important information because this is just kind of like imagine this is like an episode, an ending to like a series that's more of like the end of the very end of Lord of the Rings trilogy, where there's just a lot of like talking and kind of like writing off and establishment of like where characters go in the future. This is kind of what this episode is. It's more of like okay, this is the end. It's a gentle farewell out of this series that we've done. But there's still some action going on. So in AD 790, after 3 years after the Council of Nicaea, there is a revolt against Irene. And the main reason for this is because she has been fucking over her son, Constantine VI. So the revolt in Asia Minor in 790 was a significant turning point in Irene's reign and in Byzantine politics. Up until that point, Irene had ruled as a regent for her son, Constantine VI, but there were increasing calls for him to assume independent rule. Despite his age, the soldiers in Asia Minor, often seen as a barometer of Byzantine popular opinion, rebelled with demands that Constantine VI take the reins of power without his mother's oversight. They're getting tired of her meddling. Irene was pretty fucking smart and very good at manipulating people, and was manipulating her son, manipulating people around her son to stay in power. She would constantly get into arguments with him and cause a bunch of issues. This uprising was not just a military insurrection, it exposed underlying fissures within Byzantine society, as was often the case in Byzantium. Religious controversy bled into political conflict. The revolt against Irene reflected a sense of unease. Among the populace, particularly those who were wary of the concentration of both religious and political power in the hands of one individual. This was more than just a campaign against Irene. It was a broader movement challenging the nature of imperial authority and the Byzantine state's theological positions. Although the revolt ultimately failed, its consequences were far-reaching. It triggered a period of political instability, weakening Irene's position and emboldening her rivals. This turbulence laid the groundwork for the series of events that would eventually see Irene deposed and exiled, culminating in her son taking power for a brief and ill-fated period. Very brief, because after what Irene does to her son, there is no fucking way the guy was going to live a normal life. Yet, in spite of its immediate impact, the revolt did little to solve the underlying issues that had instigated it in the first place. The questions surrounding the role of icons in the church and the balance between church and state remained, as did the division between the eastern and western branches of Christendom. There's still a clear division there. It's worth noting that the pushback against Irene likely also resulted in the stigmatization of alternative religious views, as they began. Pushing against her was essentially pushing against the Second Council of Nicaea and pushing against God, as she was the religious and temporal ruler in that instance. The wave of discontent that spurred the revolt was met with an increased fervor for religious conformity. Those who espoused heretical or pagan beliefs would have found themselves even more marginalized and honestly just killed by mobs. Moreover, the revolt served as a vivid reminder of the precariousness of female leadership in a patriarchal society. While Irene had successfully navigated a maze of religious and political challenges, expertly so, very smart, very powerful lady, the willingness of her subjects to revolt against her showcased the persistent obstacles faced by women in power. In spite of her achievements, Irene was still subjected to the same systemic vulnerabilities that had plagued female rulers before her, and would continue to do so after her reign had ended. In the grand tapestry of Byzantine history, the revolt of 790 was an emblematic moment. It embodied the perennial struggles between orthodoxy and diversity, centralized power and local resistance, and stability and change. While it did not bring down Irene immediately, it set the stage for the tumultuous events that would follow, demonstrating the volatility of Byzantine politics and the enduring challenges of ruling this multifaceted empire.